No princess would ever dream of such a groom. Elderly, portly, and rather unkempt. The ladies of the court looked sympathetically at their new mistress, the young Queen of Portugal, Eleanor. When she fainted on the steps of the Lisbon palace, either from the unbearable heat, it was July, or from the realization that she would soon have to share a bed with the old Manuel I, a colorful group rushed to her aid. Eleanor bore the Habsburg name and was born in Leuven in the year 1498. Her parents, Duke Philip of Burgundy and Joanna of Spain, lived in the Netherlands without any thoughts of a crown. However, one after another, all the children of their Catholic Majesties, Ferdinand and Isabella, passed away. Soon after, the Queen herself died. Joanna was to become the only heiress of Castile. As she packed her belongings for the journey, the new Queen of Castile succumbed to her husband's pleas to leave their 3 children, Eleanor, Charles, and the recently born Isabella, in the Netherlands. The plan was for the heirs to arrive in Spain later. But things turned out differently. After receiving the crown, Joanna soon became a widow and was subsequently locked away in a fortress because her own father deemed her insane. Eleanor, along with her brother and sister, remained under the supervision of their aunt, Margaret of Austria. It was not a cheerful childhood. The princesses were raised strictly, with no leniency in any aspect of their upbringing. To make matters worse, they were also deprived of sufficient resources. Surprisingly, the future Emperor Charles V's sisters wore each other's dresses and had to share a single room for a long time. Once he gained full power, Charles set about arranging the futures of his family members, first marrying off Isabella, then looking for a suitor for Eleanor. In the year 1517, the princess was ordered to return home. Her first decision was to visit her mother, and it was a horrifying sight. If Joanna had been locked away in sound mind, years of confinement had truly clouded her judgment. Eleanor left the fortress in tears. Just a week later, she was informed that her fate had been decided. She was to marry King Manuel I of Portugal. Of course, Eleanor had been prepared from childhood for the reality that princesses do not choose their suitors. But she could hardly fathom her brother's decision. Manuel was 29 years her senior and had been married twice before, both times to Eleanor's own aunts. His son from his second marriage was nearly the same age as his future stepmother. And yet, she had received proposals from 2 English kings, as many French suitors, and another ruler from Poland. But Eleanor set off for Lisbon. The wedding took place in the most dreadful heat. In her marriage to the unpleasant Manuel, the Queen of Portugal gave birth to 2 children, Infante Charles, who died in infancy, and Princess Maria. And in the very same year that her daughter was born, the Portuguese ruler succumbed to the plague. A widowed queen is a monastery's best friend. Eleanor, who had just turned 23, could easily have joined the ranks of former sovereigns who found refuge in a convent. However, Emperor Charles V had other plans for her future. Initially, there was a proposal for an alliance with the Constable de Bourbon, a French defector. But the political landscape in Europe soon shifted when King Francis I of France was captured and brought to Charles. This amorous Frenchman didn't spend his time in captivity feeling bored. The conditions of his imprisonment matched his rank. He took a keen interest in Spanish traditions, cuisine, and women. Naturally, the noble captive was introduced to the former queen, Eleanor. Francis was captivated. Eleanor was doubly enchanted. A young king and a captive at that. This was the stuff of chivalric romance. Here he was, right beside her, rather than just a character in a story. In other words, when peace was signed in Cambrai, the parties agreed that the French king would marry Eleanor Habsburg. For both, this was a second marriage. Their daughter Maria was to remain in Lisbon, as the Portuguese princess was primarily the property of the Portuguese king, and only secondarily someone's daughter. The wedding took place on the 4th of July in the year 1530, and once again, summer was sweltering. What a promising alliance it was! Yet it did not come to fruition. While Francis may have been enchanted by Eleanor, that feeling soon changed. The king was not known for his fidelity. The new Queen of France wore her crown but spent her nights in solitude. Eventually, she stopped lamenting and only regretted that God had not blessed her with more children. Years passed, and the freshness and youth of Eleanor faded into the past. Rumors circulated that King Francis had infected her with syphilis, but who knows how true that was? Eleanor Habsburg, again, according to gossip, eventually sought solace with her ladies-in-waiting. However, the intimate secrets of this ruler remain unknown to anyone. In the year 1547, Francis I died. Eleanor perceived this death as a release. Now she could return to her homeland. There was no delay in her move. In Madrid, the queen immediately wrote to her daughter, Maria, inviting her to come and live with her. This turned out to be Eleanor's greatest disappointment. The Portuguese Princess Maria, her own daughter, had transformed into a haughty, self-assured, and very sharp-tongued individual. After spending less than a month with her mother, she expressed her desire to return home. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 20 years. One last time, Eleanor attempted to connect with her daughter. In the year 1558, she traveled to Portugal to see her, but that meeting also brought her no joy. On her return to Madrid, the former queen of two kingdoms died from an asthma attack. As for Maria, Eleanor's daughter, she never married and had no children. She managed to shape her own destiny, unlike her mother. But that's a whole other story. If you like it, subscribe, like it, and thank you for your comments.